Danny, what happened to your neck? Danny, what happened to your neck? Huh? You did this to him, didn't you? You son of a bitch! You did this to him, didn't you? How could you? How could you?
This is just something I got out of your book, that a lot of Kubrick's work is somewhat conspiratorial in nature, or it hits on the kind of themes that you and I tend to investigate. Lolita, that's obvious.
He never let me have any fun.
Dr. Strangelove, the disturbing inner workings of the military-industrial complex.
Gentlemen, you can't fight in here. This is the war room.
2001: A Space Odyssey, AI, technology, beings outside of time and space.
I'm sorry, Dave. I'm afraid I can't do that.
Clockwork Orange is MK Ultra, and psychological programs foisted on prisoners. Full Metal Jacket, mental abuse of soldiers and the horrors of war, rather than the typical rah-rah glory stuff that Hollywood tends to put out.
7.62 millimeter. Full Metal Jacket.
Eyes Wide Shut, of course, sex cults of the rich and powerful.
If the good doctor himself should ever want anything again, anything at all.
But then you get to The Shining and it's like, well, possession and the paranormal, sure.
Come and play with us, Danny. Forever.
But a deeper look at it is that connection between paranormal activity and trauma and abuse. Anyone who's researched even ufology or just high strangeness, when people are put in extreme states of consciousness, often through something negative like trauma, they experience more paranormal activity. And so the fact that you have a movie that on the surface everyone just thinks it's about a possessed hotel, and then there's this other understanding that it's manifestations of the abuse of this kid. I mean, I think that that holds water, but it also adds a layer to just Kubrick's understanding of a lot of these themes that you and I research or I interview guests about. And it's like, man, he didn't have just a beginner's understanding of a lot of this stuff. He seemed to know it pretty well.
Oh, absolutely. And I mean, I think that there's some other kind of sinister references hinted at with The Shining as well. Well, I mean, obviously they do sort of talk about the legacy of the guests that had stayed at the Overlook over the years. What is it? The line, presidents, kings, all the best people.
All the best people.
So it was certainly quite a high society establishment during its heyday, and to some extent still is. But the thing with the Overlook Hotel, I really can't help but feel that Kubrick was specifically had two inspirations for this. One was Hearst Castle. And I say that specifically not just because of the look of the Overlook Hotel, but also the drive up to it. I mean, if you've ever driven up to Hearst Castle, it's really isolated. It's on the top of this mountain. You have to take this sort of crazy winding road up to it. So I can't help but feel that that was definitely one of the partial inspirations with that. And certainly, again, if you've been to Hearst Castle, it's not easy to see or hard to see how some very unsavory things could have taken place there. Of course, you know, there were a lot of parties held up there for these Hollywood types.
Include Cary Grant, Greta Garbo, Jimmy Stewart, Bob Hope, Joan Crawford, Charlie Chaplin, U.S. Presidents Calvin Coolidge and Franklin D. Roosevelt, and UK Prime Minister Winston Churchill.
This very isolated place that also happened to have its own private zoo with all of these taggers and stuff like that, just kind of wandering around the grounds and so forth. But the other inspiration, I think, for the Overlook that's really interesting is the possibility that the original hotel that was on the top of Lookout Mountain was the model that Kubrick was using. And if you go back and look at pictures of this hotel on the top of Lookout Mountain, it really does look almost identical to how the Overlook is made to look in The Shining. And again, it's kind of a similar thing with these winding roads up the side of the mountain. And again, for those of you not familiar with Lookout Mountain, this ties into all the stuff with Laurel Canyon. This is the spot where they eventually built that enormous Air Force base up there that was making all of these different films. It's kind of theorized that this was used as a major means of psychological warfare by the military and the intelligence community at the heart of Hollywood for a lot of years. But prior to this, there was this very, very exclusive hotel that was on the top of Lookout Mountain that, again, attracted a lot of these VIPs up there. And this just would have been so insanely isolated in this era. This would have been right back around 1920, which is, again, incidentally, right around the time frame in the film where you see Jack being reincarnated at, when you see that sort of final picture there at the end. But again, this sort of goes into some weird rumors about all this stuff. It was said that this hotel, and then later the one that they had on the top of Mount Lowe in the Hollywood area, is where a lot of these wealthy film heads and what have you would go to engage in some of their more decadent affairs that they were interested in. So in a sense, you could potentially see Kubrick with this also hinting at some of the darker Hollywood industry and what potentially went on at these isolated resorts that the VIPs have gone to over the years. And again, this maybe ties into why Jack is basically stuck in this cycle of reincarnation that seems to be directly tied to the Overlook Hotel.
Yeah, good points. And I think it also could be why Stephen King really didn't like the adaptation. He thought there were a lot of really strange choices and deviations from the initial story that he didn't get from what I've read. And that would be maybe because Kubrick was making it about something else.
What about Jack Nicholson in The Shining? Were you pleased with that?
I thought he did a wonderful job in Shining. Enjoyed it very much.
How did you feel about the movie itself?
Well, I feel both ways. I got to see it 4 times because of commitments one place and another. And there are an awful lot of things about that movie that I think are flawless and beautiful and just marvelous. And then there are other times when I feel as though I'd given Stanley Kubrick a live grenade and he heroically threw his body on it.
And I also think overlook is an interesting term. Families tend to overlook this kind of abuse, and the audience tended to overlook it too. They didn't seem to notice until people really held it under the microscope. But I just find that all interesting. I think there's probably some truth to that take. Can you believe it, people? A video clip and a peek into how that sweet THC sausage is made. For some people, I'm sure it's nice to put a face to the name, so I started making clips that are a little more YouTube friendly than the full show tends to be. Get the full show on any podcasting platform. I prefer to keep it audio only, so we have a more decentralized distribution for a controversial show, and also so I can edit out the ums and ahs and barking dogs and all the things that happen when a person records in their home environment. And then if you really like the show, you can sign up for THC Plus, and instead of 1-hour interviews, you get the full 2-hour interview for just $8. I think that's a better deal, more of a win-win than asking you to support the show by booking a therapy session or buying generic Viagra. It's getting weird out there, folks. So just go to the highersidechats.com or click the link at the top of any set of show notes, and all your wildest dreams will come true. All right? All right.